this is my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I am wearing my fancy Halloween witch hat today. The other day, I ran a Twitter poll to see which of the two seasonally appropriate new releases I'd read this month you wanted to see for my Halloweenish review. It was pretty close, but the winner of that poll was The Dark Lord Clementine by Sarah Jean Horwitz. Sarah Jean Horwitz is a middle grade fantasy author whose work I've read before. I read and reviewed the first book in her Carmer and Grit series a while ago, and I'll link that video in case you want to check it out. This new book of hers is from Algonquin Young Readers. I got this ARC copy at Book Expo, and it came out on October 1st of this year. I think this book is definitely appropriate for the Halloween season. It has a creepy castle full of spooky spooks. It also has witches of several different sorts in it. But it's definitely not an exclusively Halloween-themed read. This would be just fine to pick up at any time of the year. So, The Dark Lord Clementine is a totally charming spin on classic fantasy tropes. I thought that while it didn't always feel wholly original, the mashup of story elements ended up being part of the charm. 12-year-old Clementine is certain of her place in the world. As her father's sole child and heir, she will one day inherit the title of the Dark Lord Morceros and terrorize the inhabitants of the village over which her family has ruled for generations, from their ancestral home, the spooky and silent Castle Brack. She must perfect her dark sorcery, avoid the witches that are the enemies of all dark lords, and present a threatening and disdainful demeanor to the townspeople whenever she walks among them. She rides nightmares instead of horses, learns spells from the family grimoire, never mind that it got turned into a chicken, and sometimes manages to keep her color-changing hair appropriately somber in hue. She certainly doesn't need friends, and she'll probably outgrow her talent for growing flowers. Right? But Clementine is unprepared when trouble comes to Castle Brack. Her uncommunicative father has been cursed by a villainous witch and is wasting away, or rather, being whittled away. As he secludes himself in his tower in search of a cure, Clementine is forced to keep things running about the castle on her own, with more and more of her father's enchantments failing. She just isn't ready to be Dark Lord yet, and she needs help, even if it means she has to trust some, gasp, commoners. Meanwhile, the Whittle Witch is getting closer and closer to her nefarious aims, and it may be up to Clementine and her new allies in the end to stop her. The supporting cast of Clementine's maybe friends includes a boy who dreams of becoming a knight, even though he's got no righteous king to serve where he lives, only a dark lord. Another who got turned into a sheep and secretly thinks life might actually be better that way. And a huntress on a misguided revenge quest who seems to have appeared on the scene out of a much angstier YA novel. Throw in some down-to-earth hedge witches, an over-enthusiastic lady of the lake, and an elusive but all-important unicorn. And you've got just enough different fantasy cliches that the story never gets bogged down too much by any one of them. Horwitz borrows pretty liberally at times from a number of well-known fantasy stories, and while a few of those references did feel a little too on the nose for me, I doubt they'd be as obvious to younger readers. Clementine's story itself is basically a fun middle grade twist on the ever-popular trope of the villain redemption arc. Although, it's hard to see Clementine as truly villainous, even when she manages to play the part. She is, after all, only 12. But she does have a lot of privilege as essentially the equivalent of a princess in a kingdom that has a dark lord instead of a king. And she's accustomed to using that privilege to exert her superiority over others. Her relationship with her father is more complicated. She loves him, but we gradually come to understand the ways in which he hasn't been a good parent. This may seem obvious given that he's the Dark Lord Morceros and all, but it really isn't obvious to Clementine. And the way in which she reevaluates the way that she sees her father will probably be the most relatable element of this otherwise very fanciful story for a lot of young readers. Horwitz's writing style is more distinctive and entertaining in the book's lighter and wittier moments. The chapter titles are especially charming, and feels much more generic when the plot gets down to business and things get serious, and things do get very serious. But the book remains compulsively readable. The plot and world have just enough complexity to satisfy a reader like me, without bogging anything down too much for a middle grade audience. And most importantly, I liked Clementine herself a lot. If this is your type of book, I think you'll like her too. She's an excellent character. I gave the Dark Lord Clementine 4 out of 5 stars. If you've read this book or are planning to, feel free to drop me a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Anyhow, I hope you have a nice day. That is all. Bye for now.